In China, 80,000 children were snatched in 2019 by parents fighting for custody, report says. CNN, when Diao Xiao Lei arrived at her Beijing apartment with her husband and son after a long flight back from Canada, her mother-in-law and sister-in-law were already waiting inside. They wanted to take her 16-month-old to their family home in Gaoyang, several hours drive away, Dai said. Her then husband seemed unsurprised and told her he must have forgotten to mention it, she said. We never discussed this and there was no prior agreement at all, she said. This is not something that I agreed to. They didn't care. Dai tried to refuse locking her son in his bedroom, but she said her now former husband had been physically abusive and she was afraid. With no friends, family or neighbors nearby who could help. Several hours later, she conceded. In the following months, Dai said her ex-husband denied her repeated request to see her son. He filed for divorce, claiming she was irresponsible and didn't have time to take care of her son due to work, according to court document reviewed by CNN. Dai, a Canadian citizen, went to the Beijing police and the Canadian consulate, but she said authorities called it a private family matter and that there was nothing they could do. Then came the worst below. The divorce court granted her ex-husband sole custody of her son, ruling that it was best for his physical and mental growth to stay in his existing environment. In China, courts often grant custody to whomever is currently housing the child, according to legal experts and activists campaigning against the issue. Diao Xiao Lei and her son in Beijing, China. Dai has spent the past 5 years since then appealing the custody ruling and fighting for visitation rights. CNN has repeatedly reached out to her ex-husband for comment over the phone and social media. She is not alone. Nearly 80,000 children in China are estimated to have been abducted and hidden in divorce cases in 2019, according to a report by Jae-In, deputy director of a Beijing law firm and professor at the China University of Political Science and Law. The abductions mostly involved sons under 6 years old. To reach their estimate, Jae-In and her research team analyzed 749 litigation cases involving custody and visitation rights from a national legal database spanning 2007 and 2020. Then applied the proportion of snatching cases to the number of divorces registered in 2019. Though the 80,000 estimate is based on 2019 divorce figures, legal experts say it reflects a consistent trend seen each year, and the real figure may be much higher, since many cases might not be publicly available or settled out of court. A new law aims to put an end to this practice. In October last year, the country's legislative body passes an amendment to the child protection law with dozens of new articles, one of which declared it declared it illegal for parents to snatch and hide their children to win custody battles. The amendment, which go into effect on June 1st, were praised by some as a crucial step in protecting children and mothers. But years of loose regulations and a hands-off approach by Chinese authorities have sowed doubt as to whether a new law will change anything, say experts of family law and parental adoption. Gaps in the law. Though the details and circumstances of abduction cases differ, the result is often the same. According to activists like Dai and Zhang Jing, who have worked with such cases, the abductor moves and hides the children, typically with the help of their parents or family members. The other parent, usually the mother, is blocked from seeing her child often. They don't even know where their child is. In some cases, the abductor continues to hide the child long after winning custody, the activists say. Legal battles can be futile unless the child is being mistreated or in danger. It can be impossible to win back custody, activists and mothers say. The other parents can be granted visitation rights, but these too are difficult to enforce. Often there are no repercussions for the abductors. In at least half of divorce disputes regarding child custody, parents hide the children for various reasons, said Chen Hai-Wei, chief of the Juvenile and Family Division of Guangzhou Intermediate People's Court in Guangdong Province in a 2019 report by state-run news outlet Xinhua. At the core of the problem is China's legal system, which tended to favor the abductor and leave the few avenues of help for their partner, experts say. In China, joint custody is rare. The common thinking is that after a family breakup, the children should go with one parent rather than with both parents, said Jeremy D. Morley, who headed the International Family Law Firm in New York and has extensively studied the phenomenon of child abduction around the world. The tradition of the parent taking a child away from the other parent when there's a parental separation is something that has been in existence for a long time, Morley said. It has been very difficult to interest the court and police and other state authorities in rectifying those issues. This hands-off, single custody mentality isn't unheard of, he added. It's historically an approach that has been Asia-wide, previously seen in countries like South Korea. But in China, that policy has lingered. China's marriage law states that after divorce, both parents still have the right and duty to bring up and educate their children, and that the parent who loses custody is still entitled to visitation rights unless it is the detriment of the child. But this law is often fully enforced, parents and activists say, and there is nothing legally preventing parents from abducting their children before the divorce is finalized. Mothers who give birth while unmarried are even more vulnerable, since they aren't covered by the marriage laws, according to Zhang Jing's report. One, a mother based in Jae-In, who asked to be identified only by her surname for privacy reasons, was unmarried when she gave birth to her daughter. The couple separated several months later in 2016. She and the 6-month-old were staying at Wang's family home 2 months after the separation, when her ex-partner and a group of the other people showed up, she said. In the confrontation, they pushed her to the ground and violently abducted by child, said Wang. Surveillance footage from the street shows a group of people surrounding Wang and push her to the ground. 2 women pick up the baby and run. When Wang tries to get up, she is thrown back down, still surrounded by the rest of the group. That was the last time she saw her daughter, Wang said. She immediately went to the police, who detained and fined her ex-partner for the assault, but she said did nothing about the abduction. They told me that since the child was with her father, it was not a crime, she said. The tactic is popular because it nearly guarantees custody, said Dai. Although her marriage had not been a happy one, she had anticipated the divorce or the length her ex would go. In marriage law, the clause says that in the best interest of the child to place them with the parent they already reside with, so as to protect their psychological state, she said. As soon as the judge heard the child is with the father, there is very little chance you win back custody. The practice is so common that it is often viewed as the sensible thing to do. If you want custody, you have to rely on yourself, said Wang, adding that if you were to ask the law firm for consultation on winning child custody, lawyers may very well tell you to go abduct your child back. She spent years appealing the court for custody and greater visitation rights, but the court upheld the custody verdict on the ground of not changing the living environment, she said. To make things worse, Wang's ex allegedly disappeared with their daughter after the violent confrontation, she said. He signed a discretionary agreement allowing his attorney to fully represent him in the litigation process, meaning he doesn't need to appear in court or stay in the city. After the child was abducted away, I haven't seen her for 4 years, she said. I cannot find where the father is. CNN tried to reach out to Wang's ex through his last known phone numbers, but was unable to contact him. Dai too appealed the custody verdict twice after her divorce was finalized, escalating it to the Beijing High Court, but she lost her both times, with the judges upholding the initial verdict that it was best to keep her son in his stable current environment, according to court documents reviewed by CNN. Once you get the thing's ruling, it's almost impossible to overturn it, Dai said. The further you go along, the harder it is. Still, Dai continues to fight. Her visitation verdict, issued several years after the divorce, allows her to see her son twice a month. But she said her ex-husband doesn't show up for the agreed visit and doesn't take her calls. She has little choice but to continually reapply for enforcement through the court. The process takes months, she says, and ultimately only allows her to see her son once in the courtroom, sometimes for only an hour if her ex shows up late, before she has to apply all over again. My son actually didn't know I exactly existed for many years. She was taken when she was so young. He just barely knew how to work at the time. She said, I was a stranger. Even today, he's never called me mom. He's never called me mom. It's so draining psychologically, financially, emotionally, she added. It just takes so much out of you to keep going and keep fighting. How will my son even know that I struggled for so many years? My parents in her situation choose not to fight because they know how futile it can be, which is another reason why the real number of cases per year is likely much higher than Zhang Jing's estimate, said Molly. Why report them if you know that nothing will happen? Molly said. You won't open a lawsuit if you know your chances of success were slim to none. I don't think most of these cases were being reported. 80,000 is just the tip of the iceberg. Motives and cultural beliefs. Zhang Jing's team discovered that among the cases they examined involving child abduction, about 63% of the abductors were men, and nearly 2/3 of the abductees were boys. There are a few possible reasons for this, activists say, a primary one being the traditional idea of inheritance and bloodline. Many families still hold a preference for male children, and as primate wealth has accumulated in China in recent decades, families' emphasis on male heirs and bloodline inheritance has increased, said Zhang's report. But at the same time, women are having fewer babies. The number of newborns registered with the government dropped almost 15% last year from 2019, and the birth rate in 2020 was the lowest recorded since the People's Republic was founded in 1949. This undersupply of sons means the need for passing on the family's bloodline is major motive in many cases of parental child abduction, said the report. The older generation especially attaches great importance to carrying on the bloodline, which intensifies the fight for child custody. The one-child policy and China's tendency for single-parent custody has exacerbated this problem, said Dai. Though the one-child policy was partially relaxed in 2013 and formally ended in 2015, in many families the burden of providing a grandchild, and specifically grandson, and continuing the family line lies solely on one child. It gives them enormous pressure, she said. A Chinese Cultural Revolution poster depicting the one-child policy. Domestic abuse is also a common factor in cases of parental child abduction. Among the cases of child abduction, Zhang Jing examined that cite the reason for filing divorce. Nearly 39% cites domestic violence. In these cases, abusers may be taking their children as a way to gain power and exert control over their victims, said the report. The majority of abduction cases reported occurred in places with rapid economic development, like Shanghai, Beijing, or Guangdong, said the report. In these economic hubs, couples tend to be more financially independent, and women are more likely to have their own income, meaning they are more able to file for divorce and fight for custody. Another reason this phenomenon is so widespread could be because there are so many migrant workers across the country, said the report. Nearly 300 million by some estimate. These people move from rural areas to large cities for work, which make it easy for abductors to take their child and leave, often back to their home province where they still have family members. Finally, the long-standing cultural belief that the family's affairs are their private business has meant outsiders, including authorities, are often reluctant to step in. For years, activists have argued that this reluctance protects perpetrators and neglects victims in other household conflicts like abuse and domestic violence. If two strangers fight, the public security organs will deal with it in accordance with the laws and regulations, said one. But if it is a husband who beats his wife, the punishment will be mild, or even no punishment. These factors have all created an impossible situation for women who find themselves with little assistance, legal protection, or ways to win back custody of their children. The new law. Under the new amendment to the family law, which will go into effect in just a few weeks, it is not allowed to compete for custody rights for snatching or hiding underage child. Those who violate the articles may bear civil liability in accordance with the law, or face unspecified penalties according to the law. For many activists and mothers, the law has been a long time coming. After losing custody of her son, Dai co-founded an organization called the Purple Reborn Mother's Law to connect and help others in this situation, as well as lobby for institutional change to better protect parents and children against abduction. The group has launched initiatives such as sending petitions and victim testimonies to the National People's Congress, the country's top legislative body. Dai estimates they have also provided legal and psychological support to several hundred people so far, the vast majority women. Their cause has gained broader support over the years as public awareness has grown about similar issues. The problems of domestic abuse and child custody were thrust into the limelight in 2016 when China finally enacted its first nationwide law prohibiting domestic violence. The closing meeting of the 13th National People's Congress Standing Committee in Beijing, China, on October 17, 2020. Women have since been speaking out about their experiences with abusive partners or child abduction, with some high-profile cases helping increase visibility around the issue. Even government officials have spoken out in support of changing the marriage and custody law, including the delegation of the National People's Congress. After years of campaigning, Dai is cautiously hopeful of the new law. "It's definitely a good step forward," she said. "Very gradually, I think things are getting better in China." However, she cautioned that the law is only a law when it is able to be enforced. There are additional steps that could be taken, providing protections for visitation rights during the divorce period, or laying out clearer standards on which behaviors constitute snatching and hiding children, said Chen, the chief of the Guangzhou court, in the Xinhua article. By 2019, the amendments to the law were already being drafted and deliberated by the country's legislative body, though the final articles still fell short of clearly defining the parameters and the repercussions of the offense. And for mothers who have lost custody or visitation of their children, the new law comes too late. "You can always earn money back, but you can never earn time back," said Dai. "My time is not infinite, and my child's time is not infinite. You are dealing with a child that is growing and changing and evolving. It's almost unfeasible that they said this is the best solution there is," she added. "There has to be the better way." Reporting contributed to CNN's Beijing Bureau.